Well, for more on this topic, we're joined by Manny Anekal, founder and CEO of Versus Sports. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
Now, let's start with a look at what motivated Tencent to really make this move to limit playing hours.
Yeah, I think, before we get into the motivation, we really need to talk about how big this game, Honor of Kings, really is in China. The game and the estimates are anywhere between 160 to 200 million users play this game. So when you compare it to the US, imagine if half the population was playing a mobile game at one time. So the game is absolutely massive. From a revenue perspective, again, from the low end, you're talking the game is going to make potentially $1 billion this year, up to potentially $1.5 billion. So the game is very, very massive in general. From my understanding, when I've read the Tencent report, is the reason that they imposed the restrictions on children under the age of 12 is that they were getting a lot of complaints from parents and teachers that the kids were essentially, quote unquote, being addicted to the game and essentially playing it a lot. And you can tell by those numbers and the revenue and the time spent, the number of players, why they could potentially want to go ahead and get in front of this.
So being that this is really a behemoth of a game, how do you think this move to then limit playing time is going to affect Tencent's gaming business?
Well, here's the not so dirty secret about mobile gaming that those in the space, know that actually only about 5% of people that play mobile gaming will actually spend money in the game. So 95% of the audience will never spend a penny. So the majority of that audience, Tencent claims that about, I believe, 25% of the Heroes of Kings audience is under the age of 19. So if you're talking under the age of 12, the percentage of paying players probably is very, very small. Now, I can't comment on Tencent's financials, but Tencent has come out and said that they don't see a huge accretive drop in their revenue based on imposing these sanctions for children under the age of 12.
And are there any other examples of companies, both perhaps in China and the US, of making these same sorts of moves?
I think obviously, between what China does with their regulations and legal laws, between what the U.S. and what we do here is vastly different in certain areas. But I think the closest example that the U.S. has done, no U.S. company has imposed sanctions in terms of time limits for game, whether it's PC, console, or mobile gaming. But the closest I would say is Apple's example with in-app purchases. A few years ago, I believe a child of 8 years old spent several $1,000s inside of a mobile game just by clicking buy over and over. And Apple put in restrictions in there and parental controls to basically limit children for essentially running up charges on their parents' credit card. And I believe now they even get notifications that, for example, hey, your child wants to purchase a game or wants to purchase items inside the game, and the parents, essentially allow them to do that by accepting yes. So I think that's the closest example we'd have here in the U.S. as to what Tencent has been doing in China.
So given the concerns over addiction and parents complaining and perhaps these kids spending even some money on these games, how likely are we to see more government regulation in this field?
That's a good question. Every time, the question of addiction or gaming, or especially here in the U.S., gun violence comes up, and the shooter happens to play a first-person shooter or happens to like video gaming, the question of, hey, does video game cause violence? And, that report's been done over and over, and video game doesn't lead to violence. I would say more than likely that we have 300 million guns in the U.S. That's probably leading to the violence. So the question of does gaming lead to addiction? Addiction you see across, many forms of leisure, whether that be gambling, slot machines, racing, poker, whatever it may be. So I don't necessarily think, we can really single out gaming just for its potential addictive value. Right. Anything that you play 24, 48 hours without stopping is probably potentially bad. So I think anything that requires, parental control over their kids. I only allow my son to play for, 1 hour a day maximum. So,
right.
I think it's all of our responsibility to do that.
So then, Manny, depending on what we see happen with Tencent, can we expect other gaming companies in China to perhaps follow suit?
Tencent is by far, they are the largest gaming company in the world. They are the largest gaming company in China. Will other companies follow suit? Potentially they may. It depends on, their mobile game, how they see their percentage of kids playing their game. Again, Heroes of Kings is just so massively popular, and it's so much bigger than any other game. The game is actually getting its own potential theme park in China. That's how big the game is. So we'll see how other Chinese companies follow suit.
Certainly lots of room to grow. Thank you so much, Manny Anekal, founder and CEO of Versus Sports and The Next Level.